Sudbury.com has invited all the provincial election candidates from Sudbury and Nickel Belt in for a chat to discuss their views on the issues. Today we're joined by Mila Wong, who's running for the Consensus Ontario Party. Is that right?
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Many people, I think, will remember you as a city councillor and a provincial candidate in the past. What made you decide that this was the time to get back into politics?
I think it's the right time because every election we go through this competition to buy your votes. So each party will say, I'm going to give you 54 beds. And the other one says 15,000 beds. You know, like it's so counterproductive. If we genuinely want to have our, especially healthcare system better, we don't do government that way, to the highest bidder and whoever can buy the most votes. It's really because you really want to make a really good Ontario. So I wasn't planning to run this election, but when I start to hear again like the bidding war of I promise you billions on this and this and that and that, which are actually thoughtless. Because when you promise, you have to back that up why you are giving this. Let's take 15,000 beds promise by the PCs. Mm-hmm. Are they aware that we really don't have staffing complement right now? We are all service providers are actually chasing every PSW and every RN to fill our hours at work. So I think having somebody in the local riding is in tune of what is actually the reality here. And that's why Consensus Ontario, the aim is becoming an independent MPP is the most attractive to me.
In the past, you've run for the Tories, for the Liberals, for the NDP. The leader of your party is Brad Harness.
Yes.
And he used to be a Reform Ontario fellow.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can give me a sense of what the difference between the Reform Party and the Consensus Party is.
I really don't know the Reform Party. I think it's kind of an extremist, kind of more extreme than the former Mike Harris. So I don't know the Reform Party well, but I like what I see on the Consensus Ontario. Consensus Ontario is actually not a new concept. It's here in Canada, we have Nunavut and Northwest Territories, and in Europe, we have Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, and the Dutch polder model. And somebody told me last week that don't forget Finland also is in that kind of. So it's not something that's new and invented, no. But to me, it's indicating that if a country like Europe, who had more history in different styles of government from monarchy, oligarchy, they have settled to this kind of government. So there's something to look and say, why did they settle in this kind of government? How to run their governments that way?
Yeah. I'm curious, the Consensus Party platform has a lot of fairly different ideas. One of them is to have municipalities take more responsibility for schools. Now, I wonder, what does that mean exactly? How do you give cities responsibilities for education?
Well, I think in that context, we want each levels of government have an accountability level because those kids live in our municipality and that education system, delivering that education is also with our community. So that way we see, example, let's see problems on mental health. There should be like a seamless access to this kind of services that actually will help the students in the schools. So we like, in that context, we like seamless of response to any kind of a problem.
So how do municipalities function then in terms of education? What's the vision the Consensus has for the role cities would play?
Well, let's see who collects your education tax. They are the nice fit. They should have actually a dialogue. The fact that you're collecting taxes for education, it's not a mismatch.
I guess what I wonder is, would there be new costs to municipalities to do this, and would the province provide money for that?
Well, I tell you, sometimes you don't need new monies. You just look at how things are run right now in healthcare. You might not need new monies. You might not have to promise billions this and billions that. Oh, money we don't have. It's just like, to me, it's a hollow figure because you really don't have the money. We are 312 billion in debt. And during the Harris time, it was 195. And it just escalating, and it is scary. You cannot just like you and I in our personal finances. When there's no money in the bank, it just says NSF. So I think the government should get off that deficit financing, and it's scaring everybody.
The other element of the education platform I wanted to find out about was the plan to have principals basically take over the responsibility for school budgets and for hiring. And you would only hire teachers for 3-year contracts and support contracts. And I wonder, are you looking at ending teaching as a full-time job or permanent job, or just what?
So the details of what you're telling me, did you get that from
your
yeah? So he's doing a 3-year.
Yeah, 3-year contracts for teachers and student and support staff, and the principals at schools would hire all the teachers.
Well, me, I'm anti super boards. I would rather go straight to whoever is going to administer a school, rather than, because every time you have different levels responsible, that is just added bureaucracy. That is just added to the inequities of access. Because now you have so many heads to say, okay, we agree. I think it should be simple.
But have the details of how you would suddenly just hire teachers for 3 years? Is that?
I don't. That detail to me was not explained. But because I don't have a platform, I can disagree.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the elements of the consensus platform, is that it literally says MPPs wouldn't be leaders. They would just do whatever their constituents want, and they would find that out through surveys and that sort of thing. Yeah. What I wonder is how you bring in policy that might be good but isn't popular. So if you're just, sort of ruling by whatever the public wants, the public doesn't necessarily understand, the complexities of government sometimes, or, nobody wants a new tax, nobody wants programs cut. How do you function as a government when you're pretty much tied to whatever people tell you what they want?
Well, usually most of this consensus government is, they're forming committees actually. I think that will get rid of the premier, a minister of health or something. It's my understanding is 5 individuals in a committee, and it's actually every voice has to be brought in, and to get some commonalities. But there are issues that I think very common to any writing is healthcare. The biggest cost to us right now is healthcare, and it actually is dysfunctional. And I think I will find nobody who will have no consensus in saying that, to me, healthcare needs surgery. Maybe a laparoscopy, just to check what's in there. But you don't have to gut the whole system, but you need to restructure it. I think starting with a review of the LIN, the Local Health Integrated Network. Yeah, because I was just reviewing the Auditor General's report, 2015. And I want to know where those recommendations are now, whether they were implemented or not. And somebody down south, in the context of health and mental health and all those other challenges we have right now in Sudbury, is that the government actually has its own chronic illness, and it's called implementation deficit disorder. And every government has done that. They are good in promising. Implementation comes in, nothing is done. Nobody takes it and say, okay, we did this, can we follow through with this? Yeah. And there is no evidence base. Everything that had been implemented, nobody follows up if it's working. And to me, if we do that review, we might have enough money and don't need new money to be repurposed to the crisis.
You mentioned healthcare a bit, and the spending promises that other parties are making. It seems like they're sort of competing with each other to promise new long-term care homes and beds. One thing I haven't heard a lot of talk about is the situation of personal support workers in the province. They're notoriously underpaid. They have very stressful work conditions. There's high turnover. Yet, keeping people at home longer before they have to be, put in a LTC home is much cheaper. Yet, we haven't heard a lot of, we heard some talk, but not a lot of action. What would the Consensus Party do in terms of supporting personal support workers?
So, if you live in Sudbury, and I'm a service provider for the city, I serve people with developmental disabilities. We know that it is very hard to find frontline staff. And even from our ends, to us, what counts actually are the actual frontline people. They make it happen, either for my sector or the healthcare sector. I would propose that if we are targeting like 15,000 new long-term care beds, I can also say factually that we don't have staffing capacity for that. And I would propose that if we are in the state of crisis, that maybe for the next 2 years, anybody trying to study PSW should be no tuition. I think the government can actually give that as a good investment. Because now when we have those, and especially if there's promise of increasing the level of care, well, you can promise that, but if there's no hands to do it. So making the tuition free will be a good investment for any government of the day. Yeah.
I'd like to hit one more sort of dominant theme of this election, and that's hydro prices. I was reading through the consensus platform, and it talks about bringing in a flat rate. And I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit and maybe let voters know how that would help them in terms of high rates.
Okay, well, I think the voting public is smarter than the smart meters. Maybe the CEO has a smarter meter. But I think when people have constantly the same level of income, I think it is good that one can actually budget for hydro. So if you know that in your household you're spending like $50 a month on hydro, you can budget that, and so now you can allocate maybe $150 or $50 a week for groceries. It's the unknown. When the rates go up and down, and your wages stays the same, you gotta have some predictability whether you can afford to buy that food or not. So having a monthly rate actually gives people that stability of what they have to budget every month.
Okay, but how do you get those costs under control? Hydro is such a complex problem. What kind of measures can you take long-term to deal with the issues in the system?
Well, I think it's a crown corporation. I should be taken back by the province, and then they can control that and reduce it.
Oh, you think they should buy back the shares?
Absolutely, because that was a mistake. Look, balloons, anything that you create become a crown corporation, it becomes like a kingdom of itself, and they just do what they please. The recent raise on their wages was kind of obscene. We are 312 in deficit, and that just shows that they have the audacity to even tell everybody. That means they don't feel they're answerable to anybody.
How do you accomplish everything that the Consensus Party is aiming for and still balance the books? Because alone among the parties that I've read so far, you guys make balancing the books a real priority. But I haven't heard a lot of detail on what you would cut, or what spending, or where you would find the money to balance the books and still accomplish all the policy goals that you have.
I think the first review will actually be restructuring of the healthcare system, because healthcare is the biggest user of monies. And I think we need to, and when I say efficiencies, I don't mean protect the trenches, okay? Get rid of bureaucracy, decomplicate life. And so reviewing that actually and repurposing the savings from that can actually be put towards the deficit reduction. You have to start somewhere, either small, and eventually you'll be smarter in where you're gonna get this. But I don't go for cuts, because when you go for cuts, that's most of the time people equate it to removing jobs. We like repurposing of programs that are not working, have not been implemented, or nobody is following up. See, implementation of programs, when you implement it, you also have to have reviews of it. It has to be evidence-based, whether it had achieved its target. It's not being done. So to me, a program existing because it was like a gift of election past should be reviewed. And then the next government comes in, gets rid of that. We're so fragmented. We're not cohesive because each one tears down what the other one did. That's the danger of with government with parties.
Mila, thank you for your time today. Ontario goes to the polls June 7th.